everyone. Welcome to the Your Life Unfiltered podcast with your guests, Kituko Thari and Deepam Jain. In this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests to connect the dots between their early experiences and what they're doing today. Today, we have special guest, Aum Gandhi. Aum, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thank you both for having me on the show. My name is Aum Gandhi. I'm a U.S. trail athlete for Merrill. I do crazy long distances for a crazy long time. I live and breathe running. I live and breathe endurance sports, and um, yeah, I just also love Bollywood. I think that's kind of like my that's like my elevator pitch, I think, when to introduce
Got
myself
it.
to people.
Awesome, awesome. Tell us a little bit about your early childhood, early upbringing, and where did you grow up? What kind of environment was it? And try to connect with some of those early experiences with what you're doing today, so that kind of set the stage for us almost.
Yeah, definitely. So, a good place to start is I grew up in Los Angeles, born in '94. Pretty much just spent my entire life in California. Mom's side of the family in India, dad's side of the family here. And yeah, childhood was kind of like a blur. It had its like lows and it was kind of rough. The growing up, the finances weren't that great. The kind of struggled with bullying, had depression at an early age, was obese for the first 18 years of my life,
Oh,
and actually got a pre-diabetes diagnosis when I was 18. And the doctor basically told me like, look, if you don't like change your lifestyle, then in 2 weeks you're pretty much gonna have like full-blown diabetes. And yeah, I mean, struggling with that depression from a young age and just trying to outcast myself from other people around me because I never really fit in. I think there was eventually sort of like a wake up call for me to like try to change my life. And that was when I started moving into a weight loss journey.
wow. Is that when you started getting into running and fitness, or was there, at a later point in life, or was it
So
just
running
in these
actually,
early days?
so running actually came a little bit later. I come from a family that doesn't really didn't really have the best eating habits, and eventually I started going to food as kind of like a comfort for my own depression and never really held myself accountable until I got that diagnosis of pre-diabetes. Then I really started like looking towards myself and realizing that I'm the only one who can change myself. And so that was kind of like a big shocker and a wake-up call. And I'll say that it didn't happen overnight. But over the next 2.5 years, I did everything to lose over 90 pounds from 250 to 160. The only thing was I didn't really do it the right way. My relationship with food wasn't that good. I was basically starving myself, getting on the court and playing full court basketball and going home and like eating nothing basically. Um, so later adult years, got into the corporate world and I started ballooning back in weight to like 220. And that was sort of when running came into the picture. I think it was about 4.5 years ago.
Wow, that is an incredible story. So you've had the two extremes there, right? Where you've been at a situation where you're eating very unhealthy and you've gained a lot of weight, but then you've also gone the other extreme and just got delved really deep into fitness to get back into the weight you're at currently. So that's fascinating. So when it comes to that, like how do you stay consistent? Because I think that's the biggest challenge for a lot of people. It's when you're trying to lose weight very rapidly, right? It's hard to keep up with that intensity. So do you have any suggestions or tips for anyone that might be looking to do that? Is like how do you keep up that pace?
Yeah, definitely. First off, I would say that the first time I did it, one thing I did wrong was that I was so focused on like having like six pack abs and like just looking fit and looking like those bodybuilders. And I'm telling you that those people are amazing and they work hard, but I can tell you for a fact, because I have bodybuilder friends, that they're not happy and they're not totally healthy. And social media gives you a really, really like one-sided perception of everything. So I would say that your focus should be on being healthy first and being happy first. And um, don't put too much pressure on yourself. I feel like a lot of people, especially this time of the year, I used to do this all the time. I was like a habitual quitter. I tried more than one time in my childhood to lose weight until things finally started clicking. And I think what really worked for me was realizing that the process is not going to be linear or perfect. It's going to be up and down. And my advice to somebody who would be starting something like this would be to just do 5 minutes every day. Um, whether it's like walking, whether it's like starting to eat more of the right food or drinking more water. Um, it's never going to be a perfect process, but consistency, even just 5 minutes, will reap more benefits than going intense and then like stopping the next week, which is a lot of what I used to do. I've tried every single diet in the book. I've gone so hard and like quit like 2 weeks later. And it was really just consistency over time, and asking myself, like, what's the bare minimum I'm willing to do, even if I'm having a really bad day, versus like, what's the most I could do?
Got it. So it's like focused on consistency paired with sustainability.
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic. What about dietary changes? Because I know you said the first time you didn't really change your relationship with food. So did you do anything the second time around that made it more sustainable to like not just, drop the weight, but also maintain a healthier weight?
Definitely. I mean, the first time around, I think it was like two extremes. Growing up, I would eat a lot of fast food, having like Del Taco, Taco Bell, like 4 or 5 times a week, multiple meals,
Oh,
like
wow.
a can or two cans of soda every day, just junk food all the time. Um, and I switched to the other extreme when I lost the weight because I was so, even losing weight is like starts to become addictive when you start to see results. So I started like, no sodium and like you can't have any chips and no ice cream. I quit fast food cold turkey, which I mean was just, it's insane. And like honestly, it would burn out almost anybody. And um, now I think what I realized has helped me out is that um, there's a balance. And this is something I've even just figured out like the last year or two. Like my relationship with food is always evolving. There is no good or bad food. There's just like foods that are more nutritious and less nutritious for you. And I think a good rule that I follow is the 80-20 rule, which is like 80% of your food should be nutritious and caloric dense so that you can get the nutrients that you need. And then 20%, like, go ahead, eat the donut, have the potato chips. You can get hit by a bus tomorrow. So you gotta like treat yourself so that it's sustainable. Like you said, like more sustainable as a lifestyle.
Okay,
Makes
wow.
sense. Just curious to hear your perspective on, how's the changes in your eating and your active lifestyle has impacted other areas of your life, right? So, for example, obviously, when you lose weight, you're more mobile. You can just move around a little bit more and not get tired as quickly as you would, let's say, if you're a little bit heavier. But what other changes have you experienced that came along with losing weight and just being more healthy, eating clean, and all of that?
Like more on the mental and spiritual side.
Exactly. Or just, regular day to day, right? So it could mean that you were like more energetic than before. You could like sleep less, but also, do more, be more rested. So things like that. Just wondering, how has being healthy and being active, uh, through your activities and all, has impacted other areas of your day to day life.
Yeah, I definitely think that compared to when I was having like fast food, I definitely feel like I'm more energetic than I used to be. I feel like I have less clutter in my brain. Um, I always felt like I had a lot of brain fog growing up. I'm sure there were other factors to it, but I noticed immediate changes, even just 3, 4 weeks after I started eating healthier. Uh, I've also had to sleep a lot less. I still think that sleep is important, and I make a priority out of it, and I prescribe making sure you get at least like 6 to 8 hours, hopefully on the 8 hour side. Everybody's different, but there was a time when I think minimum needed to get like 11, 12 hours of sleep just to function. And I noticed that that changed when I lost weight, and not just lost weight, but became healthier from a nutrient perspective. And I also felt like even though I do still struggle with the highs and lows of depression, I felt like my symptoms have gotten better since eating healthier. I feel like food has a major effect on that.
Got it, got it. Have you also thought about, let's say, some natural supplements to substitute some of your healthy eating? And by that, I mean like just, taking vitamin D supplements or vitamin B supplements or ketamines and all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually plant-based when as an athlete, so I'm like a fully vegan athlete. I do treat myself occasionally, like off season, to like like some dairy products and stuff, but I definitely don't really particularly go after cheese or milk. Um, so and I also don't eat meat. I've been vegetarian my whole life. So I'm typically
Hmm.
more on like on the anemic side. So I'm always making sure that I get iron supplements. I also take vitamin C to supplement that. And I definitely, to get balance out the protein intake, I definitely get in like my favorite brand I would say is like the Orgain plant-based protein shakes. And yeah, just throwing a little bit of supplement in there to make sure that I'm on top of all my nutrients.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so I heard vitamin C, iron. What about vitamin D and vitamin B12, like how Deepam was saying? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Deepam, but I think the reason you're emphasizing that is that's like a very common deficiency across many people.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Almost like 99% of the people are tested with vitamin D deficiency, and specifically D3, as well as B12. And those are the most common ones because almost every year I would go and I would get these tested and just be test on deficient on these two. But last year, actually, I started taking supplements for both of these, D3 and B12, and then I have experienced immense change in my daily lifestyle. I'm more energetic. I actually, with even with less amount of sleep, I can function a lot better than before. And by no means I am actually, considered, on a healthier side. My BMI is pretty much normal, but still, some of these things have really made my life a little bit more optimized than it was before.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the way I think about vitamin D is, although vitamin D is a vitamin, in your body it essentially acts like a hormone. So it's vitamin D is very important, and
Right.
like you synthesize vitamin D through sunlight on your skin, so it converts cholesterol into vitamin D through the natural process of the sun hitting your skin. But even with that, it's most people don't get enough sunlight for it to get the level of vitamin D that you need. And so, especially for vegetarians, for vegans, taking supplements is very important. I know, that you mentioned you're plant-based. There are plant-based sources of vitamin D as well. It's like moss and that kind of stuff that you can actually get vitamin D supplements for. So you could definitely take vitamin D without, basically switching away from the plant-based diet. Vitamin B12 as well. There are plant-based sources, so that's good as well. And then actually, I don't know if you take this or if you've heard of it, but also ashwagandha is a really good one too.
Oh yeah, I do take ashwagandha. And
Nice.
I also used to take vitamin D, and then ever since I kind of jumped into the really long distance running on the trails and being out there, I get so much sunlight. Uh,
Yeah,
I
okay,
get
gotcha.
yeah, I'm definitely not short of sunlight anymore, but for sure, like I do think vitamin D is definitely a deficiency I've had in the past, especially being a vegetarian my whole life.
Yeah, and just for context, I don't know if you know this or not, but both of us are vegetarian as well. So myself and Deepan, we're both vegetarian as well.
Awesome.
Great, that's awesome. So what got you into the very long distance types of marathons and things like that, right? I'm sure I have a feeling it's somehow tied to the fitness journey, but there's a difference between getting into a fitness journey and doing, marathons. So is there like a experience or something that brought you towards doing long distance marathons?
Yeah, I think a good place to start is kind of why I started running. The This happened like April of 2018. I was kind of back in the rut of depression again. I was back up to 220 pounds. So I was 160 at one point and I gained 60 pounds back. And I was working a private consulting job in civil engineering for a small company. I was the only civil engineer at the time, so I was working like long 70, 80 hours a week, sometimes more. And just other things were, not going so great in life. I was struggling with a toxic relationship. And I just, when you're working like a long job and you come home at the end of the day and it's already dark, like there aren't a lot of things you can really pick up or turn to deal with those mental struggles. So that's kind of what I'm leading into here is that, ironically, I got into running not because it was a physical thing or to burn calories, but I was actually looking for a mental outlet for some time and meditation and peace. And it's one of the most accessible things you can do if you think about it. You can just put your shoes on, get yourself some workout clothes, and you can get outside and get in a quick jog. For me, that quick jog was a quarter of a mile, and then I got nauseous and I kind of walked the rest of the way home. But I'll never forget that day because that sort of I think in any other moment in my life, that would have led me to like quit and give up. But for whatever reason, something clicked where I just kept coming back every single day, even though it continued to suck for the next like 2, 3 weeks. And I decided to set a goal of running for 30 minutes straight, which seemed like I was just thinking about this today. It just seemed like a really colossal thing at the time to run my first 5K, like daunting, scary. And then, I committed to a half marathon. I'm like, how am I going to quadruple that distance? And so that was like late 2018. So now you flash forward to late 2019, I've done a couple half marathons and I was signed up for my first marathon. Then this thing called the coronavirus and the pandemic happens and everything gets canceled. And at this point, I'd been hiking and backpacking for about 2 to 3 years and found out about this cool thing where people actually run on trails called trail running and decided to jump into it. And um, things were kind of like falling apart during the lockdown. I'm sure both of you experienced this as well. Like you have this moment where you're just living your life and then the next like you have to shut everything down for 2 weeks and you're just hanging out like wondering what's going on, what is this coronavirus. And so a lot of people had existential crises and I was one of them. And for a few years I had wanted to do marathons, but 3, 4 years before, I had watched this video of these guys doing 100-mile foot races, and I thought, man, like, I just want to do a marathon. Like, these guys are just like superhumans. Like, I'm like, that's not for me in this lifetime. And then, things just started falling apart, and got out of another sort of bad rut in a relationship, and um, kind of just a depressive state. And decided to start running more. And I just thought, like, well, why not? What's the worst thing that could happen if I go run 100 miles? If I fail, I fail. So, July of 2020, I committed to doing my first 100 miler in April of 2021. And I had no plan whatsoever to get there. So, a week afterwards, I was just pretty much sweating bullets, didn't know what to do. And the journey just sort of went, just went from there to my first 100 miler, just kind of figuring out like how I was gonna get there.
Okay, wow. That's a interesting story. So what did it feel like when
So,
you ran your first marathon? Because I'm sure like you probably had a feeling of, ecstasy basically when you finished your first long distance marathon. So can you tell us a little bit about like your feeling when you knew you completed that marathon for the first time?
Yeah, so the funny thing is, to this day, I've never actually officially still finished a road marathon. The next race that I did, moving towards that 100 miler was, okay, now you got to take steps toward that goal. So it's like small steps. Like, how are you going to get to that point? Like, how are you going to bridge the gap between this trailhead to like that peak that you want to get to? And so I committed to doing a 50K in September of 2020, which I think Utah at the time was one of the only places doing races because they allowed gatherings over 50 people. And so I signed up for the Zion 50K, which is basically like, it was like 29, it ended up being like a 29, 30 mile foot race. And I finished it with like a half an hour left, but I got my ass kicked pretty bad. Um, I didn't know, you're so isolated from everybody. I didn't really get to meet people in the community. So I kind of walked in there with my own research, didn't know what electrolytes were or any of that stuff. And so Charlie horsed and got really bad cramps at mile 26 and death marched the last 2 or 3 miles in and then kind of walked across that finish line. And I was like, well, I guess I'll see you again in like 9 months, Zion. Because I signed up for the Zion 100, so same course, but 100 miles in April. But, it was crazy. To answer your question, like the feeling I got, even though I was suffering in that moment, was when I crossed the finish line was like, um, man, I want to do this again. It went from like, I never want to do this again to like crossing the finish line and going, I want to keep going and see how far I can push myself.
wow, wow, that's absolutely fascinating. I'm just curious, so obviously the time to take to run a mile changes as start running more and more often. But what was your mileage when you had initially started versus what it is right now? And I
Uh,
asked that question only because that even though you don't really want to focus too much on mileage itself because obviously the consistency is more important than being in the moment is more important, but the mileage helps you keep track of the progress you've made, right, since your first run versus now. So that's the only reason why I asked that question. And once you look at that, how does that make you feel? Like, do you feel more accomplished, or do how far you've come, or like what is your feeling when you look at the progress that you've made?
yeah, I mean, I think when I first started, I would say my mileage was closer to like 15 or 20 miles a week. And that first year when I started running like 18 and 19, I think each year was like collectively 500 miles a year. And 2020 onwards, I did about 1,500 miles in 2020, and 2021 I did about 2,600 miles, and I'm on pace for about 2,500. So I think that comes out to like an average of, I'd say my base mileage now is like 40, 50 miles a week. Probably lower on the 30 miles per week side, and when I'm in the off season, because one of the things when you're racing to perform is that you don't want to stay in race shape all year long. So I kind of had a mini off season recently. I let myself put on a couple pounds because once you get going and the mileage goes up to like 75 to 90 miles a week, especially on trails, like it's really hard to keep that weight on. So I focus more on lifting and focus more on mobility and recovery, and you also want to give your body a mental break as well. Um, but to answer your question about like if you feel more accomplished, I think when you start to look back and reflect, you do start to which I did today and yesterday, you start to go, wow, hey, like 4 years ago, like I couldn't even fathom doing 30 minutes straight, or doing my first 5K. And now I could eat a 5K for breakfast if I wanted to. And, sometimes I think we need to step back and just, it's okay to look back and even just like, even for the both of you, like with this podcast, like going back like a year ago, like, or even 2 years ago, if could you even imagine doing something like this? I mean, or talking to somebody from like Indian matchmaking or somebody, like
Yeah.
it's just, it's incredible how much progress we make, even with the single step, which the journey of 1,000 miles quote. Um, and we're always just constantly moving. So I think you start to notice those achievements, and you can really give yourself a pat on the back when you like look back, um, and reflect on it.
Yeah, that's
Got it.
great.
Got it.
Thank you for sharing all that. I did have one question, right? And that is when you're training for a marathon, right? Whether it's 50K or whatever the number might be, right? I imagine that training every single day for that does put a toll on your heart muscles. So do you have any like thought processes in mind in terms of like how do you manage the amount of strain you put on your heart while doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Two things I do for sure is I always take one full rest day, every week. I used to be a firm believer of that, like nobody cares, work harder and work hard, like toxic like mentality. Um, Now I know that, recovery is just as much a part of the training process as is like training, because recovery and sleep and fueling, that's where you're actually building your adaptations. And this is something like you want to do for a long time. If you want to do anything for a long time, like you have to be kind to yourself, you have to take breaks, you have to be adaptable and listen to your body. So even if my schedule says do 7 miles today, but I listen to my body and I see like, oh, my hamstring feels strained right now. And that's something, listening to your body, I think is something you get from like experience of like doing these things. Then, like if I'm feeling like that strain or something, I might change it to like a bike ride or something like that. Or I might take a rest day and, just kick the run. Or instead of doing that speed workout, I might do an easy run. I think it's just about, yeah. Yeah. I think I forgot the question you asked me. I, I do this all the time. I go off on tangents.
Yeah, so the original question
That's all
was
good.
how do you reduce the strain on your heart?
Yeah,
Which you
so
already answered, it's taking break days.
one was like take a full recovery day. The other thing that is more specific to my routine is that I'll build for 3 weeks. And I think this is true in like weightlifting and other sports too. I'll build for 3 weeks, and then every fourth or fifth week, I'll take like a deload week where I'll cut my mileage in half and let my body recover from the strain of training and build adaptations, and then go back to building for another 3, 4 weeks.
Got it. Okay,
Got
got
it.
it. So it's basically like in waves. So you train really hard for a little bit, ease up for a little bit, then go back to training hard again. Okay, that makes sense. So it adds to the sustainability piece that we're talking about earlier.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Now, follow-up question on that. Since you are running that much, I feel like your appetite must be huge. Can you tell us about like, what's been your go-to meals in order to refuel, re-energize, as well as do you have like a specific type of food that's great for a training perspective or
I think the simple answer for me would be anything in a tortilla, that's vegetarian or vegan. But my favorite go-to meal recently has been like, lentil pasta, with like mushrooms, and I, also just love to like stir fry tofu. I go pretty simple on the cooking. I'll put a little bit like soy sauce or olive oil and put like a bunch of veggies in there like broccoli and, put some greens on the side, and that's kind of a go-to for me. And I do love like, even though I'm vegan, most of the time, like I do love treating myself to like, the occasional pizza. not with dairy cheese, but with like plant-based cheese. They're getting like, I think they're getting like way more better than they used to be in terms of like texture. Um, now, I don't know if you would like this, Ketul, but especially since my co-owner for the company I work for is a New Yorker, but I love putting pineapple on my pizza.
So for me personally, pineapple on pizza by itself, not a fan. But if you add in jalapenos with it, it's pretty
Yeah,
decent.
yeah, yeah. I love jalapeno pineapple. Always have my whole life.
Yeah,
And
if it's just
lastly,
pineapple, I'm not a fan. But if you combine jalapeno pineapple, it's pretty decent. Like, trust me. I mean, I like other toppings better, but I can eat jalapeno pineapple. That's pretty good.
yeah, one thing for sure though is I'm definitely a fan of like thinner crust pizzas. I'm not a fan of like that Detroit Chicago style. It just feels like a soup bowl to me at that point.
The deep dish.
So
Yeah.
those are basically my go-tos.
So then you would really like New York style pizza then. Like, have you had New
Oh,
York
100%.
pizza in New York before?
No, I've actually never been to New York. I still got to get down there. I have a friend doing New York City Marathon next year, so I'll probably get down there for the first time,
Okay, wow. Yeah, definitely. I mean, highly
or
recommend
up
the
there, I
pizza.
should
So
say.
you can't go wrong with the pizza here. It's no for its pizza.
Yeah, now you got me all excited for New York style pizza. I've heard so many good things about it.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Um, I'm just curious to hear your perspective on, given all the learnings you've had over the last few years when it comes to your fitness journey, what, if you were to go back a few years, what would you change about the process that you approach the whole fitness journey, right? It could be, the mentally, it could be, in terms of your training regimen, it could be anything, but any advice or anything that you would change about the process you've taken?
Honestly, I would say I wouldn't, and I've reflected on this question many times in the hours that I've run, but the answer is always naturally like a no for me. Like if I had a chance to go back and tell my past self all the stuff that's happened, first off, my past self would think like, you're crazy, shut up. But like, like I would say like I wouldn't change anything because no, whether it was like the highs and lows of life or whether it was the process, because
Hmm.
the I think the growth isn't the ends or the awards or the achievements that you get. I think the growth is the process. And
Hmm.
so I would just, if there were any words I would give my past self, it would just be to like hang in there. It does get better. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but trust the process. Um,
Got it.
because the mistakes you make, and like to make mistakes is, I don't know like where, especially in like the Indian community, there's like this like perfectionism mindset. Um, but it's to make mistakes is like synonymous to being human. I mean, everybody makes them. Like we're all just trying to figure our way out through this life, and the only way to grow as a person is to fail and keep making mistakes and just keep trying and keep pushing forward as a pace. So I don't think I would change anything.
Wow. Wow. That makes a lot of sense.
I like that. No
Um,
regrets, basically. No regrets.
right.
No, definitely not. Sadness over things, occasionally, yeah, like, thinking about the lows, I think it happens to everybody. You'll have like that flashback to like, man, was I like that? Or like, man, did this happen? Or why me? But like, as far as like overall like regrets, I would say none, because um,
Hmm.
if you're a believer in the butterfly effect, then you're here today for a reason. Um,
Right.
and if you change that one thing or make something better, who's to say you'd be living the life you have right now?
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit and discuss more about one of the ventures of yours called Run Try Mac. Could you tell us a little bit about the journey of Run Try Mac? How did you get the idea of that? What is this about? And what are you doing currently when it comes to this particular venture?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Run Try Bike is like it's basically a media company. We have a website that posts articles and stories about human beings in endurance sports. We used to be like those listicles like Outside Magazine and Trail Runner Magazine and Life. Now we're just more about like telling life stories, but using endurance sports as a conduit. Our focus is more on inclusivity and inclusion. So we give light to stories that are normally not told instead of focusing on and highlighting the elites in endurance sports, whether it be triathlon, marathons, or ultra running or whatever. We focus more on like people of color, like LGBTQ, disabled athletes, female athletes, and we just try to highlight their stories, whether it's like the person who had a drug addiction and overcame that, or the person who was an amputee and became a runner, or like, the working mom, the single mom who has like 3 kids who's like trying to make this thing happen. And we're all about telling those stories. I'd say we're like the
Hmm.
Players Tribune on the media side. On the marketing side, we market for small race companies. We're basically like trying to be like the Southwest Airlines. That's the way Jason would I would describe it. Is we're like Southwest Airlines for race companies. We market for them, but we don't charge them an arm and a leg to do it. Um, and so I would say the journey for Run Try Bike, it's actually been 2 years for the company now.
Hmm.
I joined the company back in actually last October as a contributing writer. Before that, in April, like a week before my first 100-mile race, I wrote an article for them, and it was like about how I started my journey in running. And it was like probably like a month after they officially launched the company. And then in October, I decided like I decided in October of 2021, a year ago, which is crazy, that I didn't want to be a civil engineer forever. And so I started writing on the side and I started looking for freelance writing opportunities. And I started building my portfolio by writing for Run Try Bike, which ultimately in March led to me becoming their social media manager because Jason hates doing social media. And I took on the opportunity because I was looking for more freelancing opportunities and wanted to give marketing a shot and didn't know that it would ultimately lead to, in June, to me being invited to join their ownership group and become one of the co-owners. Um, and I would say it's been a crazy journey, and I think everything that's happened so far has revolved around Run Try Bike. Um, fun fact or crazy fact is that I wrote an article on the importance of being positive in endurance sports last December, and somebody from Merrill saw the article, looked up my resume on Instagram, and messaged me on Instagram like, "Hey, we'd love you to be one of our sponsored athletes." Like that, how does like that's a one in a million thing for anybody. Like, and I kept thinking just yesterday, like how many things had to fall into place. Me making X decision and Y decision for somebody from Merrill to see me. Not to mention they hit me up on Instagram, so I'm thinking, man, is this one of those like fake ambassador messages? And then I get an email at my official email from like admiral.com. And so, I mean, yeah, like joining the ownership group was a quick yes for me too, because I'm like, man, all the good things that have happened in the last 2 years have revolved around this brand. I think this is meant to be, not just because I align with the other owner, but like because it's an endurance sports, because everything's revolved around it, and because my gut instinct says so.
Got
Yeah,
it.
that sounds great. That sounds great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I agree that the odds of being selected, excuse me, as a sponsored athlete, it's slim to none. So it's very impressive that that happened. I think exactly what you said. It's probably the decisions that you made that helped for that to happen.
Absolutely.
And congratulations on this huge feat, actually. I'm sure there's a lot more things that are coming your way, and cheering for that for you on the side. Um, all right, yeah, Ketul, definitely we can jump into the next round, which is the rapid fire. As the name suggests, rapid fire. Let me know when you're ready, and we'll just jump right into it.
Yeah, we have a rapid fire too, so I'm excited to be on the other side of one for once. Ready to go.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so let's start with the first one. Tea or coffee?
Coffee,
All right, mountains or beaches?
mountains.
Okay, morning person or night owl?
Ooh, morning person, definitely.
How early are we talking?
Oh man, probably like 5 or 6. Not as
I
not as
knew it.
early as it used
I
to
put
be.
up I put up 5. I knew you were gonna say 5 a.m. I just knew it. I had a
Oh
feeling.
man, yeah,
Sometimes
wow, that's
earlier.
awesome. But what time do you sleep? Out of curiosity, do you sleep at like 8 p.m. or what?
I try to shut eye by 10 o'clock at the latest.
Okay,
But
okay, that's
definitely
pretty
try to
good.
have all my electronics off by 9 o'clock. All that blue light and stuff.
Wow, that takes a huge amount of discipline, so kudos to you for that. All right,
Thanks.
so what's your favorite comfort food?
Oh man, burritos all the way with the good like pico.
Okay, do you have any preferred brand? Let's say Chipotle or something like that
I do love
that you go
Chipotle,
to?
but there's nothing like making like a homemade burrito or homemade burrito mix and just making like your own pico.
Got it. Awesome. What's your favorite virtue in others?
My favorite virtue in others,
Hmm.
honesty.
Okay,
Honesty is definitely my favorite virtue.
awesome. Wow. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Ooh, my biggest pet peeve. Um, Man, not respecting somebody's boundaries is my
Hmm,
biggest pet peeve. If you tell somebody or like if I tell somebody like I don't like this, then I expect you to respect it, and that's it, you know.
got it. That makes sense. Okay. What's your secret superpower?
My secret superpower. Oh, oh man, consistency. Uh, Consistency can turn the average person into a superhero.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I like how you said
Um,
secret superpower because we already know the legitimate. I mean, the not so secret superpower, which is running very long distances.
yep, yep, 100%, 100%. What's a superpower you wish you had?
A superpower I wish I had. Oh man, honestly, this will sound a little bit dull, but just flying. Just flying sounds fun to me. Like just soaring through the sky like Superman, um, would be a great superpower. Definitely not in for the
Yeah,
invisibility and all that stuff.
no, that makes a lot of sense. I wish I had the flying power myself, so I totally get it. All right, so actually that brings us to the end of the rapid fire. But and, the another question in the series is not rapid fire, but what's been your biggest accomplishment in the last 1 or 2 years? I guess we know the answer, but I just wanted to hear from you.
Biggest accomplishment in the last, um, if we're talking, so two of them for me is if we're talking running accomplishments,
Hmm.
I just ran the Moab 240-mile endurance run, which is like a 4-day foot race. And you sleep when you want to, you eat when you want to. There's 8 rest stops every 20 miles.
Hmm.
Crazy race, extreme weather fluctuations. You're going day and night. Definitely not for the faint of heart. I made it 235 miles and I fell short of the 1 yard line on that race because
Oh
I
wow!
sustained a hip injury and I'd only slept
Oh,
for 3 hours. So I was seeing audible hallucinations. Um, but that, I think more so than the race, it was the achievement was how I reflected on that didn't let the failure get me down and didn't beat myself up for it and told myself like, hey, you didn't get the finishing medal or the buckle, but you did 98% of the race. Why would you shoot yourself down about it? Um,
That's a huge
and then
accomplishment. Yeah, that's true.
and then the other one for me is that every race I've done this year and every race I've done since like my third or fourth half marathon, I always do it for a charity. Um, every race I've done since last December, I've been raising money for the Richstone Family Center in Los Angeles, and their focus is on helping families in low income brackets with child abuse, domestic violence, and they're kind of unique in that they adopt entire families. So they realize that a lot of issues are rooted in the entire family's generational trauma. Um, and I've known them since 2016. I know they're volunteers, and um, I've gone and visited the kids, ranging from 5 to senior year of high school. And this entire year, I've done a campaign which I'm going to do one more race this year, but I've done a campaign to raise $25,000 called the For the Kids 2022 campaign. And we've raised about $8,000 now. And I'm hoping, so I'm doing a 6 day race. This one is on a 1 mile track for 144 hours, and my goal is to get 300 miles or more. But more so than that, my goal is by being on that loop is to continue to raise awareness for Richstone and reasonably try to get us from 8,000 to over 10,000 and beyond if we can. So I would say my biggest achievement outside of my running achievements is maybe not being able to change the world, but hopefully having changed at least one life.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, that's pretty huge. Okay. I guess that's bring us to the end of our discussion today. Thanks so much for your time. Before we wrap, one last question. Do you have any recommendations for our listeners? A recommendation could be a piece of media, could be a book, podcast, TV series, movie, anything that really inspired you or stuck you in, with you in some way.
Ooh, podcast. Besides your podcast, um,
Definitely,
I would
definitely.
I would say, man, that's a good one. I don't know if you both have heard of David Goggins. Um,
I've heard the name.
but
Yeah, I'm too
I've heard,
familiar with him,
I've heard
but
the name. Yeah.
but there's a book called he's putting out a new book, but one of the books that really changed my life is called Can't Hurt Me. And it's just dives into like his childhood and how he was like this not very talented or genetically gifted person, but he just worked hard to overcome the struggles in his life and became like, a Navy SEAL, Army Ranger, and eventually became like an endurance athlete. So that's definitely a good book to pick up, and it will definitely get you pumped up to do things that you want to do. And other than that, my
Okay.
only other advice is like just, hang tough and keep moving forward. Like I know holidays can be a tough time for a lot of people with like seasonal depression and everything, but you're gonna be okay. You're still here.
Wow. And thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it.
well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us for our conversation here, Om. It was a pleasure to hear more about your story. If you guys are not already connected to the Your Life Unfiltered podcast, please be sure to give us a follow on Instagram at Your Life Unfiltered, as well as follow our page on YouTube. Again, it's at Your Life Unfiltered on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for joining, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Om.
Thank you.